why is it better to actually look towards the past rather than to the future?
Well, the origin of that question is the fact that objectives are future looking, right? Because like if you're saying this is where I want to be in the future, and then you measure everything with respect to that, then you're just thinking about the future, and that's what we're used to. I mean, people think that's common sense. Like, well, of course, what else would I be thinking? I'm just going to go dwell on the past. I want to think ahead. Where am I going? But the thing is, you have to consider that actually it's not as principled as it sounds, because the future is a total fog. We have no idea what's going to happen in the future. We don't know the stepping stones that lead to that thing that you're envisioning. By hypothesis, I'm assuming this is like an ambitious objective. So we don't know the stepping stones. And so what really is principled about the fact that you think you're going there? Like, you basically have no information to help you, no compass to guide you, and you're just thinking about this thing in the abstract. And it's not principled. And so you said, well, what else can we do? This is why actually we're all so obsessed with objectives, because everybody thinks there's no other choice. But that's a security blanket. It makes you feel better saying you're going somewhere, because everything has to be like rigidly defined and assessed. And that's basically our culture, because we want to mitigate risk. We're so obsessed with mitigating risk. It's like anything that might have a risk, I need to do something to make sure it doesn't have a risk. So make it more objective. That's why we're so future focused. But I'm saying, like, actually, it's not so principled, because you're not mitigating much when the world is deceptive. So what would it mean to be past focused? Well, actually, the past has one interesting property that the future doesn't have, which is that it is known. Basically, everything is known about the past, especially your own past. You know what you've done. You know why you did it. You know what happened. And you know what led from there to here. Like, you know all the stuff about the past, much more than we know about the future. And we know this collectively and individually. Sure, we don't know literally everything that ever happened in the past. We know a lot more than the future, about which we know absolutely nothing, because it hasn't happened yet. So what's the good of that? Well, the good of that is that if you want to do something interesting, it's an important insight that to compute how interesting something is, you need to compare it to the past, not to the future. Interestingness is a comparison with the past, because we're comparing the idea, the direction, with where we've gone before to understand whether it's interesting. Or like a big word that comes up in this is novelty. It's really what we're doing to a large extent. It's not the total picture, but part of it is novelty. We're deciding whether an idea is novel. Because if it's not novel, it's already been done before. That's why we look to the past. And so it's not interesting. I mean, basically nothing that's not novel is interesting. It's like, okay, at a point in time it was like the idea of like this box on four wheels that can get you from A to B. That was interesting at some point, but right now it would be a really boring conversation if I start acting like, let's talk about what this could mean. It's like that's called a car. It's been around for more than 100 years. It's not novel at all. That's the problem with it. It was at one point, and it would probably be exciting to talk about like 120 years ago. And so it changes what's novel over time, because as soon as something comes into existence, it's no longer novel. But if you want to compute what's novel, if you want to figure out what's novel, you need to compare it to the past, not the future. And the past is the large, highly informed set of information. Like, it's everything that's ever been done. And so all of that is coming to bear on like whether this is a novel idea. Now, it's important to also note that like what's interesting is not only determined by what's novel. In other words, it's true that everything interesting is novel, but not everything novel is interesting. So that's an important point. So there's some novel ideas that just suck, so they're not actually interesting. But if it's not novel, it's definitely not interesting. So you need to start with that. But then other things enter into what's interesting as well, which is basically also from the past. It's your entire life, basically. Like all of your aesthetic preferences, all of the experience you've ever had in your life, what matters to you, the things that made emotional impressions on you, the things that made technical impressions on you, all the epiphanies you ever had. That all comes to bear. Also your evolutionary heritage, like just like the way your brain is structured, things you inherited just by being part of evolution. All of that is coming to bear on what you find interesting. That's a lot of information, but it all comes from the past. And so this combination of novelty with that is how you decide on what stepping stone is next in your life if you're not being objective about it. And in some way, I think it's more principled because there's more information in the past than the future.